Okay, welcome to another Sunday Shop Talk. Today I'm going to be talking to you about finishes on wood and also the finish between the wood and the resin. It's probably the main email that I get like a private email, and I'm sorry but I just can't answer those private emails. I can't really deal with them. I just get bombarded by too many questions. I'd rather have questions in the comments and then I can raise them and others can help. So if possible, try and keep your questions to the comments. And don't forget the Patreon site, which is much more in-depth. And going forward, I've got 3 or 4 river tables on the go at the moment, live edge tables. I'm going to be doing real in-depth on how I achieve my finish across the wood to the resin, which is one of the questions I get asked. Now, before we dig into all these different finishes you can apply to the wood, I will be showing you my favourite one first and then going backwards so you can see what I like to use or what's easiest to use in most instances. But I would also like to address the question, how should I do this, what resin and all that, how did you get started doing this resin thing, or what pigments did you use? Really, the best way to do this casting is to practice on small items. I know it sounds obvious, but people are emailing and asking me about making river tables, the first thing they're going to do. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I would experiment with the temperature in your room, I'd experiment with getting rid of the gases, degassing it. There's so much to look into. I started myself on small projects, just repairing holes and shapes in walnut. Then I moved on to chopping boards. Then I moved on to the river tables. And now I do pretty much anything with the resin, and I'm quite confident using it. And the finishes that I get, the questions, how do you do this, pigment, etc. It's all done with experimenting. And really, it's impossible to tell someone, even with the in-depth videos, I'm showing you every process, but you really need to practice, because none of this stuff is simply following, connecting the dots and you get a brilliant result. There's loads of little mistakes that can be made on the way, and the best thing to do is not to waste your time and money on the resin and the fantastic slabs, but to experiment on some smaller stuff. Anyway, I hope that makes sense to you all, but let's talk about finishes here. So let's just start with the simplest finish to achieve a good result across resin and wood. So this is going to be coming up in a future video, this slab table, and I'll be doing a real in-depth on the Patreon across how I do this join, because that's what people want to know about. So the best finish to start with, I would recommend, is something like a hard wax oil. There's a few brands on the market. That one's from Amazon. This is my new favourite. The other one, is the Osmo hard wax oil. My new favourite, and I'm going to put a link in the description. This is a new product from Germany. Toy safe, food safe. You can even use it on your chopping boards. It can be put into a can and sprayed with an air gun, or put on with a buff, as you've seen me do. And the other thing is, it is the hardest hard wax oil I've ever come across. So much harder than the cheaper one you buy on Amazon, and definitely harder than the Osmo. So this is an incredible new product. You're going to see me using this virtually all the time. Link in the description. It's brought into England by a really nice guy that I met at one of the trade shows. I'll link you into his website and his Facebook. Definitely check this out, it's awesome. They do an indoor version, outdoor version, all kinds of stuff. I got a little sample to start with. Anyway, never look back, that is brilliant. So hard wax oil. The first thing to say about hard wax oil across the joint, the hard wax oil will not interfere with your resin, which is why it's so good. So you can get this finish to your desired grits. It's a whole nother story talking about the grits, because obviously this thing here is going to go to about 2000 and be polished. This can't go to 2000 because no finish will stick on it. So that is something you've got to experiment, and I do talk about how I do it in other videos. I may do a future video on that. So hard wax oil, very simple to achieve a good finish, because it doesn't really stick to the resin and you can polish it off and it looks lovely. The other finish people ask about, and you see me use, is wipe on poly. Now, I picked this up and a few cans of this in the States, and I just stuck them in my suitcase, because in the States, these things in their equivalent of B&Q are about $8. I think in England it's £30 on Amazon. You have to import it, but it's a really, really good product. What's good about it is really hard and it's almost instantly dry. So you do have to avoid a little bit getting it too much on the resin, because it will stick to the resin. But if you're going to do 2 or 3 coats of this on the wood, get it really, really hard, then when you buff across with your buffing products, like you've seen me use, like the Festool one, doesn't have to be Festool, people have asked about that as well. It can be any polishing product you're comfortable with. I've just used this all the time, so I stick with it for the final finish. I'll come back to the buffing at the end. So wipe on poly, very good, but you do need to polish it off the resin. And again, maybe not the easiest to use, but you do get good results, very, very hard. The next one, a quick one, I don't use this very often, I've used it on my clocks. This thing's called Ultra Shine, Ultra Shine. This was £18, so not cheap. It's a thick paste, people use it for turning wood. Now what I liked it for was the finish, what I got on my clock faces, just slightly more, it's like a thicker paste. And obviously the clocks are not going to be used for putting cups on and hot food and stuff. So I don't know how it responds to that. But this is another good finish if it's for something that's going on the wall, like a wall hanging or a clock. So that's easy shine. The old-fashioned Danish oil. Well, I don't really recommend that anymore with the resin because the resin is so hard, and the Danish oil, you want to keep applying it. It's something you'd use in your kitchen worktops, or if it's a nice piece of wood that you want to bring the grain out and then keep feeding it. But it's a pain when you've got resin to use a product like this, which is kind of a keep topping up type product. So I avoid that with river tables. Now we come on to a new product which I used on one of my other builds, and I'll put a link in the description. This product is Ruben Monaco. It's just been brought into England. This is phenomenal, this product. It's a little bit expensive, and it is a 2-pack. So you need to mix it to get it to harden. It takes 5 to 7 days to fully cure, but it's touch dry within about, I don't know, 15 minutes. So delivering to a client can be tricky with this for me. If it's a really big table, it's got to sit in my workshop. And especially in the winter, I don't want to stick it in the barn or a stable. So for me, I really like this, but I do need to plan how I'm going to use it, because the 5-day, unless you can talk to your client and explain to them that they're going to have to put this thing on one side, not use it for 5 days like it's a kitchen top or a table, but a brilliant product. They also do pigments, ash grey I bought here, walnut. The walnut works really well on walnut, oddly enough. You can see this kind of, the softer wood here, which will need a finish to harden, but what the walnut will do will blend across the colours. So it's really, really nice to use. So that's another one to look into, the Monaco. We talked about Osmo. Then the last two finishes, now you don't see me using these very often. I did use it on a boat table because the client wanted it sealed. I actually prefer the natural look of wood and the resin as you see the join. So I like the wood finish on the wood and the resin to be resin. But if you do want that kind of absolutely rock solid, almost like a boat varnish finish, there's two finishes from Easy Composites that I use. One is a coating resin. You literally apply that up to 8 coats over like with a paintbrush. It sort of self-levels, very fine coat. This is what I used on the boat table. It's really good. The other way to do it, if we look over here, I've got these two tables underway, and you can see the amazing colour in this hue that the resin, it's just gone over the top, brings out. Really nice. Now, the resin I'm using here is Glasscast 50 to do the table itself, because the pore's probably 35mm in one hit. So you're not going to get a fantastically flat finish off Glasscast 50. But what I could do tomorrow, if I wanted this table to be encased in resin, is I could go ahead and pour a very fine layer of Glasscast 3. Don't worry about this, because this will all be at the B stage tomorrow. Glasscast 3 over the top in a really small 2-3mm layer, and that would encase this in resin, if that's the finish you like. Now for me, I don't really, it's not my taste to have this resin on top of the wood. I do love it around the edges, you know. But that's another way to do it, is use Glasscast 3. There's quite a lot of information for everyone on this video, but this is all stuff that I use. Now I use, for cutting back, someone's asked me about across the join. I'm going to try and do a whole video, starting with on Patreon, really behind the scenes on working between the resin and the wood, because it is quite a sort of a knack, really. I mean, anyone can do this, but it just takes practice. It really does. It helps having some good compounds. This is the MW1. There's a black one and a white one. Someone has suggested it's quite expensive. Well, it is expensive, but it lasts forever. Unless you're knocking these tables out 5 a week, this thing's going to last you a couple of years probably, and it really does. And this I've had for a year, and I make loads of this stuff. You don't use much of this paste. The reason I picked the Festool finishing compounds, there's one which is the 5001, which is the kind of speed cut, and then I've got speed gloss 9000. So that's 9000 grit and 5000 grit. Now the reason I picked this product, and people ask me, can I use car ones, can I use 3M or M3 or whatever it is? You probably can, but I chose these because I was buying some Festool and I didn't want to pay the delivery. So I bought a saw and I added this to the order because they were selling it, and I did some experimenting. And that's what I would recommend, experiment on it, because these are definitely not the only speed polishing products out there, or cutting products. There's one finish that I don't have, and they don't actually have it in England. I've got to import it, and I think it's called Oddy's Oil. I'll put a link in the description. One of my viewers has said it's fantastic, and I do believe him. I think that will go across here. I'm actually thinking about becoming a dealer for that oil in England. I'm going to speak to them, because if it really works well on this cross-grain joint between resin and walnut, then it could be something that we all like to use. I have heard from some people, though, that it's not as hard in some areas, where you are in the world, you know, different climates, it doesn't go as hard, say. But I hope that makes sense. It's a lot of information, I know, and a lot of talking on this video, but it is a big subject and I do get asked a lot. Anyway, as always, thanks so much for your support. There's loads of new patrons, which is great. I will be doing, I'll show you now, these tables, one here, I've got a table there, there's one over there, there's one here, there's two there, and I'm going to be doing real in-depth videos on these on my Patreon page, and I'm going to try and cover the boring subject of finishing across the join, and just really pushing that home. On my YouTube channel, I can't do that. It's just not what everybody wants. I don't, you know, so that is why the Patreon channel there is to go really behind the scenes and get that kind of over the shoulder look. And it's also a place where people can talk really in depth. YouTube is really about making interesting videos that the masses can watch. Anyway, that's what I've found on with my viewers. So anyway, thanks again for watching. I'll see you on the next one.